The maid stood frozen in the grand hallway, her white and black uniform trembling under the weight of their stares. The billionaire's wife smiled, too calm, too kind, as she said, "You'll do nicely." Melinda didn't understand then that she wasn't being offered kindness. She was being chosen, like an object. Behind those perfect smiles, a plan was already in motion, one that would steal her body, her freedom, and her child. But when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just break the Hamilton family, it would burn everything they stood for. What happens when loyalty turns into betrayal, and a maid becomes their greatest threat? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The chandelier glowed like captured lightning, its light spilling over marble floors, crystal glasses, and the quiet hostility of wealth. In that brightness stood Melinda Jones, the black maid everyone underestimated, dressed in her clean white on black uniform, her hands folded, her chin lifted just enough to show she wouldn't break. Across from her, the Hamilton family watched in silence. 4 faces, 4 different shades of judgment. At the center stood Evelyn Hamilton, elegant in white silk, pearls glowing at her neck, her expression carved from ice. Beside her, Richard Hamilton, the billionaire patriarch, stiff and unreadable, the kind of man whose nod could change a life or end a career. Behind them stood their son Logan, his eyes shifting between Melinda and the floor, the tension in his jaw betraying guilt. And between them all, in the perfect symmetry of power, was Claire, Logan's wife, blonde, flawless, and furious, her arms crossed as if to keep herself from shattering. The air was thick enough to choke on. Evelyn spoke first. "So, it's true." Her tone was calm, but every syllable cut like a diamond edge. "You went behind our backs." Melinda's voice was steady. "I did what I thought was right." "What you thought?" Claire snapped, her perfect smile trembling with rage. "You were hired to serve, not to make decisions that destroy lives." "Enough," Richard said sharply, raising a hand. His eyes, cold and piercing, locked on Melinda. "Tell us, Melinda. Who put this idea in your head? My son? Or was this your plan all along?" Her breath caught. She had known this moment would come, the reckoning, the unveiling. She just hadn't thought it would feel so suffocating. Outside, rain lashed against the windows. Inside, a clock ticked steadily, a cruel reminder that no one could pause time or undo choices once made. When Melinda finally spoke, her voice trembled, but her words didn't. "You wanted me because I was quiet, because I never asked for anything. But I'm not property, Mrs. Hamilton. I'm not just someone you can rent to fix your family's legacy." Evelyn's expression faltered, only for a heartbeat, before she straightened again, her elegance hardening into something colder. "You think this is about you?" she whispered. "You have no idea what's at stake." Melinda met her gaze. "No, I think you're the one who doesn't." For a second, no one breathed. Even the thunder outside seemed to hold back its roar. Then Claire stepped forward, fury blazing in her eyes. "You're just the maid. You don't belong in this room, in this family, or in our lives." Melinda's lips parted, her voice low and broken, but every word carried the weight of everything she'd endured. "Maybe not. But the child you wanted me to carry was never yours to control." The room exploded in whispers, gasps, the clinking of a wine glass slipping from someone's hand and shattering on the floor. Richard turned pale. Logan finally raised his head, and the truth that flickered in his eyes silenced everyone. Evelyn stepped back, realization dawning too late. "You didn't," she breathed. Melinda's tears glistened, but her expression stayed calm. "I didn't plan for this. But I won't let you take what's mine." The chandelier light caught her face, the mixture of fear, courage, and defiance in her dark eyes. And for the first time, the Hamiltons looked at her not as their maid, but as something far more powerful. A woman with something to lose. A woman they could no longer control. Before that stormy confrontation beneath the chandelier, before her name carried weight in that mansion, Melinda Jones had been invisible, The kind of woman who worked quietly in the background, unnoticed but indispensable. 6 years earlier, she had arrived at the Hamilton estate with a small suitcase, a recommendation letter from a former employer, and a heart full of hope. The mansion stood like a monument to power, stone columns, glass walls, and a driveway long enough to forget where you started. For someone who had grown up in the narrow apartments of Queens, it looked less like a house and more like a promise. The head of household staff, Mrs. Grace Porter, had looked her over with her usual sternness. "We keep things discreet here," she'd said, adjusting her glasses. "The Hamiltons value loyalty and silence. You understand what that means?" Melinda had nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Her first months were uneventful. She learned to predict Evelyn Hamilton's moods, when to serve tea with honey and when to simply disappear. She memorized Richard's routines down to the minute. His newspaper folded twice, his coffee black, his disdain hidden behind polite smiles. But it was Logan Hamilton, their son, who made her nervous. He was polite, distant, and far too kind in small, fleeting ways. When the other staff spoke about him, it was with cautious admiration. "He's different," they'd say. "Not like them." He noticed things, when she skipped lunch to clean an extra room, when her shoes were wearing thin, when her hands trembled from overwork. Once, he'd left a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter with a note inside, "For your brother's textbooks. No one needs to know." Melinda hadn't spent the money for days. It felt too heavy, like accepting a kindness she couldn't repay. Still, she worked harder. Every corner of that house gleamed because of her. And for years, she believed that if she stayed humble and loyal, life would eventually reward her quiet patience. But one evening changed everything. It started with laughter, brittle, polished, echoing through the great hall. The Hamiltons were hosting their annual charity dinner. Politicians, investors, socialites, everyone dressed like royalty beneath chandeliers brighter than noon. Melinda moved between them silently, balancing trays of champagne. That was the night she met Claire Hamilton, the wife. Claire had beauty that belonged on magazine covers, but behind her smile was something sharp. She watched Melinda as if studying a rival, not a maid. When their eyes met across the dining table, Claire didn't look away. Later that night, Melinda overheard the first whispers. "She's been trying for years," one guest said softly. "IVF, specialists, you name it. Nothing works." "Poor thing," another murmured. "Richard's desperate for an heir. Evelyn's losing patience." Melinda had turned away, her chest tightening with sympathy. She couldn't imagine that pain, wanting something as natural as motherhood and being denied it. A week later, she found Evelyn sitting alone in the conservatory, gazing out at the rain. When Melinda approached with a tray of tea, Evelyn's eyes were distant. "Do you believe in destiny, Melinda?" she asked suddenly. Melinda hesitated. I suppose I do, ma'am." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Some of us are born to carry legacies. Others to serve them." At the time, Melinda didn't understand what that meant. But the tone, calm, calculating, prophetic, stayed with her. That same evening, Logan found her in the garden, trimming the rose bushes. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie loosened. He looked tired. "My mother can be intense," he said quietly. "Don't let her words bother you." Melinda smiled politely. "It's not my place to question, sir." He tilted his head. "Maybe it should be." The way he said it, gentle but sincere, lingered in her mind long after he left. Weeks passed. The Hamiltons' tension grew thicker. Claire withdrew from public life. Evelyn took over the household more aggressively. Richard barely spoke during dinners. Logan, the only bridge between them all, seemed trapped in a silent war between obedience and rebellion. Then one night, Melinda returned from the market to find Evelyn waiting in her small quarters, sitting calmly in the chair by her bed as if she owned the air in that room. "Close the door, Melinda," she said. Melinda obeyed, her heart pounding. Evelyn's tone was too gentle, her expression too kind. That was always when she was most dangerous. "I've been thinking about you," Evelyn began. "Your loyalty, your health, your simplicity." Melinda's throat tightened. "Ma'am?" Evelyn stood, gliding toward her. You've been with us for years. You know our family better than anyone. And you've kept every secret I've ever trusted you with. That's rare. Thank you, ma'am. Evelyn's smile widened. Tell me, Melinda, have you ever wanted to start over? To have your own home? Security for your brother? Freedom? Melinda didn't answer immediately. The words freedom and home felt like distant stars, visible but unreachable. Yes, she said finally. Evelyn nodded as though she had expected that. But then maybe we can help each other. That was the beginning. The night she didn't yet know was the first step into something that would test her faith, her dignity, and her heart. From that moment, Evelyn Hamilton's plan began to unfold, carefully, quietly, like a chess game in which Melinda didn't yet know she was the queen being moved towards sacrifice. The morning it happened, the Hamilton mansion felt unusually still. No piano music, no faint hum of conversation from the breakfast hall. The silence felt rehearsed, like a stage waiting for its performance to begin. Melinda had been polishing the silver trays in the dining room when Mrs. Grace Porter, the head of staff, appeared at the doorway. "Mrs. Hamilton wants to see you," Grace said. "Now." Melinda's hands froze mid-motion. Her heart began to race for reasons she couldn't name. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered, placing the tray down carefully. When she reached the sitting room, the first thing she noticed was how arranged it looked. Fresh lilies on the table. Curtains drawn just enough for morning light to hit the crystal decanter. 3 glasses. And 3 people waiting for her, Evelyn, Richard, and Logan. "Come in, Melinda," Evelyn said softly, gesturing toward the armchair opposite her. "Sit, dear. You've been on your feet all morning." Melinda hesitated. She had worked here long enough to know, when Evelyn Hamilton offered you a seat, it wasn't out of kindness. It was a signal. She sat. Richard cleared his throat. "You've been with our family for years," he began. "We value your loyalty and your discretion." Melinda nodded, unsure what to say. "Thank you, sir." Evelyn leaned forward, her expression perfectly composed. "I'll be direct, Melinda. You've heard, I'm sure, that our daughter-in-law Claire cannot have children." Melinda's eyes flickered to Logan. His jaw tightened, his eyes lowered. She had, in fact, overheard whispers, but never dared comment. "Yes, ma'am," she said quietly. Evelyn smiled faintly. "This family has always been built on legacy, tradition, continuity, and now we face an obstacle." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle like dust in the air. Then she said it, the sentence that shattered Melinda's understanding of the world she served in. "We'd like you to be the one to carry our grandchild." For a heartbeat, Melinda didn't process it. The words felt unreal, misplaced. I don't understand, ma'am." Evelyn exchanged a glance with Richard, who sighed heavily. "Through surrogacy," he said. "Everything legal. You'd be compensated well, very well. Enough to start a new life." Melinda's pulse pounded in her ears. She looked from one face to another, Evelyn's calm, Richard's stern, Logan's uneasy. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Evelyn smiled as though it were obvious. "Because we trust you. You're healthy, loyal, discreet. You have no family who might interfere. And most importantly, you care for us. You understand the weight of what we're asking." Melinda shook her head slightly. "Ma'am, this is a big thing. I don't know if I can." "You can," Evelyn interrupted gently. "And you will be rewarded beyond what you can imagine. Think about your brother's future. Think about freedom from all this." She gestured lightly toward Melinda's plain black dress, her worn shoes. Melinda swallowed hard. "Would it be my child?" "No," Evelyn said swiftly. "The embryo would belong to Logan and Claire. You'd only carry it. There'd be no connection after birth. You'd be cared for during the process. Medical, financial, emotional support." Melinda looked at Logan again, hoping for some sort of protest, some sign that this wasn't real. But his face was unreadable. Evelyn reached out, her manicured fingers brushing Melinda's hand. "This isn't exploitation, dear. It's an opportunity. For you and for us." The words made Melinda's stomach twist. Opportunity. That word again. She wanted to run. But she also thought of her brother, the school fees due next month, his dream of studying medicine. She thought of her mother's old house, falling apart after every storm. Maybe, she told herself, this was her chance to finally change everything. But deep down, something in her whispered, "They don't see you, Melinda. They only see what you can give them." She stood slowly. "I'll need time to think, ma'am." Evelyn smiled, satisfied. "Of course. Take as long as you need." That night, Melinda couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her small room behind the laundry hall, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Every memory from the past 6 years swirled in her mind, the laughter from upstairs dinners she never joined, the tears she hid when her brother's letters arrived with unpaid bills, the kindness Logan had shown her once or twice. By dawn, she made her choice. When she entered the dining room the next morning, Evelyn was already there, dressed in pearl white as always, sipping tea. "Well?" she asked, not even looking up. Melinda's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'll do it." Evelyn smiled, a small, victorious smile. "Good girl. You won't regret this." But the way she said it made Melinda's heart sink. Within days, lawyers arrived. Contracts were drawn. Medical appointments were scheduled. Everything moved with frightening precision. Yet amid all that order, one thing began to change: Logan. He spoke to her differently. Softer. Hesitant. "I never wanted you to feel pressured," he said one afternoon, standing in the hallway where no one could hear. "You should know that." "I agreed," Melinda said quietly. "It was my choice." He shook his head. "No, it wasn't. My mother doesn't ask, she decides." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, something dangerous, fragile, and real. That was the beginning of what no contract could predict. Weeks turned into months, and the Hamilton mansion transformed into a silent theater of secrets. On the surface, everything appeared perfectly managed. Evelyn hosted luncheons again, Richard returned to the office, and Claire pretended to smile for photographs. But beneath that elegant calm, something dark was growing, like roots twisting through marble. Melinda's world had become confined to 2 places: the small guest house at the back of the estate and the Hamiltons' private clinic downtown. The doctors treated her gently, almost reverently, but she could feel the invisible chains in every soft-spoken instruction. "Don't go out unaccompanied. Keep your phone off during rest hours. Everything you need will be provided." Everything except freedom. At first, Melinda tried to stay strong. She reminded herself that this was her decision, that she was doing it for her brother, for her family, for a better life. But as the weeks passed, she began to feel something she couldn't explain. A heaviness in her chest whenever Logan entered the room. He was different now. Softer. Distant from his wife, distant from his parents. Sometimes he'd come to check on her late in the evenings after returning from work. "How are you feeling?" he'd ask quietly, standing by the door. "Tired," she'd answer with a small smile. "But fine." Then he'd nod, like he wanted to say more, but didn't. Their conversations grew longer. They began sharing things no one else in the mansion would understand. She told him about her late mother, how she used to hum old jazz songs while washing dishes. He told her about his childhood, how the mansion had never really felt like home. "It's a palace," she'd said once. "It's a prison," he'd replied. Something fragile and forbidden bloomed in that loneliness. Neither of them spoke it aloud, but both felt it, an invisible thread that tugged a little tighter every day. Then, one evening, Melinda overheard something that froze her heart. She had been walking past the study, heading toward the kitchen, when she heard Evelyn's voice, sharp, low, furious. "You promised me she'd follow the agreement," Evelyn hissed. "She will," Richard's voice replied. "It's too late for her to back out now." "Not if she finds out," Evelyn snapped. "She's not stupid, Richard. If she learns the truth about that embryo." Melinda stopped breathing. She stepped back into the shadows, heart hammering in her chest. The truth about that embryo? Her mind raced. What truth? "She can't find out," Richard said firmly. "Do you understand me? Not until after the delivery. After that, she'll be gone, and we'll make sure she never returns." Melinda's fingers trembled as she clutched the edge of the wall. "Gone? Never return? Evelyn exhaled sharply. I don't trust her. She's too quiet. Too observant. And Logan, he's been distracted. Don't think I haven't noticed. Richard's voice softened. You're imagining things. No, I'm not, Evelyn said coldly. I've seen the way he looks at her. The silence that followed was unbearable. Melinda felt tears sting her eyes. She backed away, forcing herself to breathe silently until she reached her quarters. That night, she couldn't sleep. The words circled her mind like ghosts. The truth about that embryo, she'll be gone after the delivery. What had she agreed to? She began watching more closely, listening more carefully. Small inconsistencies started to appear, documents Evelyn asked her to sign, for medical purposes, clinic visits scheduled without her consent, and a locked file on the doctor's desk labeled Hamilton Confidential. One afternoon, while waiting alone in the clinic's examination room, curiosity got the better of her. She stood, walked quietly to the doctor's desk, and opened the drawer. Inside were files, dozens of them, but one bore her name, Jones, surrogate candidate number 7. Her hands shook as she flipped it open. Inside was a single page, medical notes, signatures, genetic details, and one line that made her stomach drop. Genetic source, Hamilton lineage, secondary match. Hamilton, confirmed. Her breath caught. Logan's name. She read the line again, disbelief flooding through her. The embryo wasn't just genetically tied to Claire. It was partially his, but also not hers. She gasped. That meant Claire wasn't even part of this. The embryo wasn't created from Logan and Claire. It was created from Logan and an anonymous donor. And Evelyn had lied. The entire surrogacy had nothing to do with helping Claire. It was about Evelyn creating a child she could control, a Hamilton heir, pure and loyal to her bloodline. Melinda stumbled back from the desk, her vision swimming. The file slipped from her hands and hit the floor. A sound came from behind her, the door clicking shut. It was Logan. He stared at her, then at the open file. His face went pale. You weren't supposed to see that, he whispered. Melinda's eyes filled with tears. Is it true? Logan didn't answer. He stepped forward, his expression torn between shame and panic. Please listen to me. You lied to me, she said, her voice cracking. All of you. I didn't know, he insisted. I swear, Melinda, I didn't know my mother went that far. I thought it was just a medical arrangement. Then what is this? She cried, pointing to the document. What am I carrying, Logan? Whose child is this? He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Ours, he said softly. Without you knowing, she used my genetic sample. She made sure of it. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She shook her head slowly. No. No, that can't. But the truth hung there between them, undeniable. Evelyn had chosen Melinda not just because she was loyal, but because she was the perfect vessel to bear the Hamilton heir, her own son's child, without his wife's knowledge. Tears streamed down Melinda's cheeks. You should have told me. I didn't know until tonight, he said, voice breaking. And I swear, I'm going to fix this. I won't let them use you. But she turned away, shaking. It's too late, Logan. They already did. And as thunder rolled outside, Melinda realized that the child growing inside her was no longer just part of their plan, it was part of her. And she would do whatever it took to protect it. If you discovered that the people you trusted had lied about something this deep, and that your own life was being manipulated for their gain, what would you do? Would you stay silent to survive, or risk everything for the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Emotional Stories to see how Melinda's discovery turns loyalty into rebellion. The day began with sunlight streaming through the tall windows, painting the marble floors gold. But inside the Hamilton mansion, warmth had no place. A storm was brewing in the quiet spaces, in glances that didn't linger, in words swallowed before they could burn. Melinda hadn't slept since discovering the truth about the embryo. Every breath felt heavier, every corner of the house colder. She moved through her duties mechanically, but her mind was elsewhere, on the life growing inside her, on the lies that had chained her body to a plan she never agreed to. She'd stopped speaking to Evelyn altogether. And Evelyn noticed. By noon, the summons came. "Mrs. Hamilton wants to see you," said Mrs. Porter. Melinda wiped her hands on her apron, her heart pounding. She knew what this would be. The confrontation she had tried to avoid was finally here. When she entered the grand sitting room, everyone was there. Evelyn in her pearl suit, Richard standing rigid by the fireplace, Claire perched on the edge of the sofa, and Logan, silent, distant, watching her with an ache she couldn't read. The moment mirrored the image she would remember for the rest of her life. The maid standing in white and black, facing the family that once owned her silence. Evelyn's tone was ice wrapped in velvet. "I hear you've been asking questions, Melinda. Snooping in places that don't concern you." Melinda lifted her chin. "I had to. No one here was telling me the truth." Evelyn leaned back, smiling faintly. "Truth is a luxury, dear. One that doesn't belong to everyone." Claire frowned. "What's going on? What is she talking about?" Richard shot his wife a warning look. "Evelyn." But Melinda spoke first. Her voice was low, trembling but steady. "I know what you did. I know the embryo isn't yours, Claire. I know it was made from Logan's DNA and someone else's. You lied to me. You lied to all of us." Claire went pale. "What?" Evelyn's smile faltered. "That's enough." "No, ma'am," Melinda said, stepping forward. "It's not. You used me. You looked me in the eye and promised it was just surrogacy, that I was helping your family. But you never said you were stealing from me too." Evelyn's voice dropped to a hiss. "Watch your tone." "Why?" Melinda asked, her tears glistening but her gaze fierce. "Because I'm just the maid? Because you think I don't matter?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Claire turned to her husband, horror dawning. "Logan, tell me this isn't true." Logan's lips parted, but no words came. His silence was the answer. Claire stumbled back, shaking her head. You let this happen?" "I didn't know," he said hoarsely. "Mother went behind my back." Evelyn stood abruptly. "Don't you dare blame me for this. Everything I've done was for this family, for our future." "For control," Melinda said. "You wanted to own everything, even the child that was supposed to be mine." Evelyn's eyes blazed. "That child will never be yours." The words pierced the air like a slap. Melinda's hands trembled. "I'm carrying it, Mrs. Hamilton. You might have the power, but this life, this heartbeat, belongs to me now." Richard finally spoke, his tone calm but deadly. "You forget yourself, Melinda. You signed an agreement. That child is legally ours." She looked at him, her voice shaking but resolute. "Then sue me. But you'll never touch this baby." The chandelier light reflected off her tears as she turned to leave, but Evelyn's sharp voice stopped her at the door. "If you walk out of this house, Melinda," she said, "you lose everything, your job, your home, your protection. You'll be nothing again." Melinda turned slowly, her face wet but unbroken. "I already was nothing to you. But I'm someone to this child." She walked out. No one moved. Not Evelyn, not Richard, not even Logan, whose eyes followed her until she disappeared down the corridor. When the door closed, Evelyn exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to her chest. "She'll come back," she said coldly. "They always do." But Logan's voice shattered that certainty. "No, she won't." Evelyn turned toward him, startled. He was already walking toward the door. "And if you try to make her, I'll leave too." Richard's voice boomed. "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking clearer than ever," Logan said. "You made me part of something monstrous. And you're not touching her again." He didn't wait for a reply. The slam of the door echoed through the mansion, louder than thunder. Outside, the afternoon sky had darkened. Rain streaked across the windows, the world washed in gray. Inside her small quarters, Melinda sat on her bed, her hands resting on her growing belly. Tears fell freely now, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing that her life had just split in two, before and after truth. A knock came on her door. She froze. When she opened it, Logan stood there, drenched, breathless, his tie gone, his eyes desperate. "I couldn't stay," he said softly. "Not after what they did." "Logan," she whispered. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You don't owe them anything. We'll figure this out. Together." For a long moment, she stared at him, at the man who was both part of her pain and the only one willing to stand by her now. She wiped her eyes. "If you mean that, then help me leave tonight." He hesitated, then nodded. And for the first time since this began, Melinda felt something she hadn't felt in months. But as the lightning cracked over the estate, a dark figure stood outside the window, watching. Evelyn's personal driver. Her eyes in every shadow. Melinda didn't know yet, but the Hamiltons were not done with her. They never let go of what they believed they owned. Night had fallen over the Hamilton estate, but the storm hadn't passed. It had simply moved inside, into every hallway, every shadow, every breath Melinda took. The plan was simple. Logan would drive her out before dawn, take her somewhere safe upstate, somewhere his family couldn't reach her. But inside, nothing felt safe. Not anymore. Melinda stood by the small window of her quarters, watching the rain streak across the glass. The sound was steady, almost hypnotic, yet her heart refused to calm. She placed a trembling hand on her stomach, whispering to the life growing inside her. "Hold on, little one," she said softly. "Mama's not letting anyone take you." Behind her, Logan was packing quietly, a duffel bag, cash, a few essentials. His shirt was damp, his hair messy from the downpour earlier. He looked nothing like the polished heir of a billionaire family. He looked like a man caught between guilt and redemption. "They'll realize we're gone by morning," he murmured. "We have to move fast." Melinda nodded, but she could hear the quiver in her own breath. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Logan's pause was answer enough. "My mother doesn't lose," he said finally. "But I'll protect you. I promise." Outside, the estate lights flickered. For a second, the power dipped, plunging the room into darkness. Then, as the lights returned, Melinda saw something in the reflection of the window, two faint silhouettes moving near the garden wall. "Logan," she whispered, stepping back. "Someone's outside." He rushed to the window, his jaw tightening. "That's Becker," he said under his breath. "My mother's driver. He's probably not alone." Panic shot through her veins. "We can't stay here." Logan grabbed her hand. "Then we don't." They slipped out through the back door, rain soaking them instantly. The world beyond the estate fence was nothing but darkness and thunder. Logan's car, a black SUV, waited near the servant's gate. He opened the door, gesturing for her to get in. But before she could, a beam of light sliced through the night. A voice thundered across the rain. "Stop right there." "Becker." Another flashlight flicked on behind him. Two men. Logan cursed under his breath. "Get in, Melinda." But Becker's voice boomed again. "You're not leaving with her, Mr. Hamilton. Orders from your mother." Melinda froze, her body shaking. "She sent them?" "Go!" Logan shouted, shoving her inside. The SUV roared to life as bullets cracked the air, warning shots, close enough to make her scream. Logan slammed the accelerator. Mud sprayed behind them as the tires spun, then caught. They shot down the narrow back road, leaving the estate behind. For the first few miles, neither of them spoke. The storm swallowed their silence, and the wipers struggled against the torrent of rain. Melinda sat clutching her seatbelt, her tears indistinguishable from the rain on her face. When Logan finally spoke, his voice was raw. "She won't stop. Not after this." "Why, Logan?" Melinda whispered. "Why go this far? Why me?" He looked at her for a moment, then back at the road. "Because you were the only person in that house who was real. You worked for her, yet you never bowed to her. She hated that. And maybe that's why He stopped himself, but his silence said enough. Melinda looked away, her heart aching. She couldn't allow herself to feel that, not now, not when survival was all that mattered. Suddenly, the headlights illuminated something ahead, a fallen tree blocking the narrow bridge. Logan hit the brakes. The SUV skidded, stopped just inches from the edge. "Damn it," he hissed. He stepped out into the rain to check the damage, shouting over his shoulder, "Stay inside." But through the cracked window, Melinda saw another car approaching from behind, its headlights cutting through the storm. A black sedan. Familiar. Her heart sank. Logan! They're here! He turned just in time to see the sedan stop 30 feet away. 4 men stepped out, 2 holding umbrellas, 2 carrying something far heavier. Becker's voice carried through the downpour. Mrs. Hamilton said to bring her back alive. The rest, optional. Logan drew his breath, fear twisting into anger. He ran back to the car, jumped inside, and threw it into reverse. The tires spun helplessly. They were trapped between the river and the Hamiltons' men. "Get down," he shouted. A gunshot cracked through the storm, shattering the rear window. Glass rained around them. Melinda ducked, covering her belly instinctively. Logan grabbed the steering wheel tighter, jerking the car into the embankment. The SUV slid halfway down the slope, engine smoking. "Logan," she cried. He turned to her, his forehead bleeding from a graze. "We have to run. Now." He opened her door, pulled her out, and together they stumbled through the mud and reeds toward the trees. Behind them, Becker shouted orders, but the rain drowned most of it out. They ran until their lungs burned. The forest swallowed them, the lights behind them fading to dim specks. When they finally stopped, Melinda collapsed against a tree, gasping. Logan knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded weakly. I can't do this anymore." He gripped her hand. "You don't have to. I'll handle it." But she looked up at him, eyes wide and tired. "You can't protect me forever, Logan. They'll find us. And when they do, it won't be just about the baby, it'll be about destroying me for standing up to them." Logan's voice broke. "Then I'll burn everything down before they touch you." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain softened, leaving only the sound of their trembling breaths. Melinda stared into the dark, realizing the truth that terrified her most. Even if they escaped the Hamiltons, she was no longer the woman who had entered their home. She wasn't a maid anymore. She was a mother, a fighter, a threat. And she had something Evelyn Hamilton could never control: love. As dawn began to break, Logan stood, scanning the road below. "We can make it to the bus station before sunrise," he said. "After that, they'll lose our trail." But in the faint glow of the horizon, Melinda saw movement again, cars, glints of light on metal, men spreading through the woods. Her voice trembled. "They're already here." The morning light crept slowly through the mist, soft and pale. The rain had finally stopped, but the forest still dripped with the memory of it. Every leaf, every branch glistened with dew like tears the night had refused to hide. Melinda crouched behind a fallen tree, clutching her belly, her breath coming in shaky bursts. Logan knelt beside her, scanning the road below through the faint fog. The Hamiltons' men had split into groups, combing the woods with flashlights and radios. "They're closing in," he murmured. Her hands shook. "We can't outrun them forever." He looked at her, determination hardening his features. "Then we stop running." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean we fight back," he said quietly. "Not with guns. With truth." She frowned. "Truth doesn't stop people like your mother." "No," he said, eyes burning, "but it ruins them." For a moment she just stared at him. Then something inside her shifted, the same quiet fire that had carried her through every humiliation, every injustice, every sleepless night. Maybe he was right. Maybe she couldn't win by hiding. But she could make the truth louder than their lies. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, wrapped in plastic. "Before we left, I copied everything from my mother's private server, medical documents, contracts, her correspondence with the clinic. Everything that proves she forged signatures, altered records, and manipulated this entire surrogacy." Melinda's eyes widened. "You did that?" He nodded. "If we release this, the Hamilton name collapses. She'll have no control left, not over you, not over anyone." "But that could destroy you too," she said. "I already destroyed myself when I stayed silent," he whispered. For the first time, Melinda saw the boy beneath the billionaire, Someone who had been raised to obey, to preserve appearances, to bury truth under money. And now, here he was, ready to risk everything for her. She placed a trembling hand on his. Then we do it. We tell the world. He squeezed her hand, relief flickering in his eyes. There's a journalist I trust, an old friend. If we can reach the bus station, we'll get a ride to the city. He'll meet us there. Before she could reply, a shout echoed through the forest. They're here. Flashlights flared again, closer this time. Logan grabbed her hand. Come on. They ran, through mud, over roots, down toward the sound of the distant highway. The baby inside her kicked once, a soft thud that made her gasp, then strengthen. It was as if that tiny heartbeat was urging her forward. Keep going. Logan shouted, pulling her over a fence. They burst onto a dirt road leading to an old barn. He pushed the door open, ushered her inside, and bolted it shut. Dust swirled in the sunlight leaking through the cracks. For a few moments, there was only their breathing. Melinda leaned against a wooden beam, her chest heaving. How long until they find us? Minutes, Logan admitted. She closed her eyes, whispering, then this is where it ends. No, he said firmly. This is where it begins. He pulled out his phone, opened the folder, and uploaded the files to a hidden cloud server. Then he typed out a message to the journalist. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, publish everything. Done, he said. Melinda looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had once represented everything she feared now looked like her only chance at freedom. You know what they'll do if they catch you? She said. He smiled faintly. Then we make sure they don't. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. Tires crunching over gravel. Doors slamming. They found us, Melinda whispered. Logan stood between her and the door. Stay behind me. The barn door rattled under heavy knocks. Logan Hamilton. Becker's voice thundered. Don't make this worse than it already is. Logan shouted back. Tell my mother she's finished. The truth's out. Lies, Becker snarled. You wouldn't dare. But Logan's smile was tired, defiant. She trained me too well not to. Becker cursed and kicked the door open. Men poured in. The chaos exploded, shouts, footsteps, the glint of metal. Logan stepped forward, blocking their path, shouting, You touch her and I swear. A gunshot cracked. Melinda screamed. Logan staggered back, clutching his shoulder. The world spun into motion, Becker yelling, men pulling him aside, someone grabbing Melinda's arm. But she fought back, screaming his name, clawing at the hands holding her. Let me go, she cried. You'll kill him. Becker's grip tightened. You're coming back to the estate. Mrs. Hamilton wants you alive, for now. Melinda twisted, kicked, and finally slammed her elbow into his chest. He groaned, releasing her just enough for her to grab Logan's phone from his hand and run. Melinda, Logan choked out, his voice fading. I'll finish it, she shouted back. I promise. She ran through the back exit of the barn, the sound of footsteps chasing her. The woods blurred past her as tears mixed with rain and blood. She didn't stop until she reached the old train tracks that curved toward the city. Her lungs burned. Her shoes were soaked. Her hands shook as she stared at the phone, the flash drive icon blinking green. Upload complete. She sank to her knees, whispering through her tears, It's done. Behind her, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, fragile but certain. The light touched her face, her trembling hands, the gentle curve of her stomach. For the first time, she smiled. They could take her freedom, her name, her job. But they couldn't take this. The truth was out. And it was stronger than the Hamiltons' power. If you were Melinda, alone, hunted, but holding proof that could destroy an empire, would you risk everything to reveal the truth? The headlines hit New York before sunrise. Billionaire Hamilton family accused of illegal surrogacy scheme. Exclusive, whistleblower files reveal genetic manipulation scandal. Hamilton heir implicated in secret surrogacy arrangement. By mid-morning, the story had exploded. Every television screen, every social feed, every radio broadcast carried Melinda's truth. The Hamiltons' empire, A dynasty built on image, wealth, and secrecy was unraveling in real time. Inside their marble mansion, chaos reigned. Evelyn paced the living room, her pearl necklace trembling against her collarbone. "Who leaked this?" she snapped. "Find out who leaked this." Richard slammed a newspaper down on the table. "It's over, Evelyn. You can't bury this one. The clinic's under investigation, the doctor's talking, and Logan." "Don't say his name," she screamed. "He's no son of mine." But she knew the truth. He had betrayed her. Meanwhile, across the city, Melinda sat in a quiet hospital room under protective custody. The police had found her after her escape, guided by the journalist she'd contacted. Logan had survived the gunshot. He was recovering 2 floors below. For the first time in months, Melinda felt safe, though her heart still trembled with exhaustion. Every movement reminded her she was carrying a life that had nearly been stolen. The door opened softly. A woman in a dark suit stepped in. "Ms. Jones?" Melinda looked up. "Yes. I'm Assistant District Attorney Harlow. We're preparing charges against the Hamiltons. But we'll need you to testify." Melinda's stomach tightened. "Testify?" "Yes," the ADA said gently. "You're the only one who can confirm how they manipulated you. Without your voice, they'll find a way to twist the narrative." Melinda hesitated. For years, she had been invisible, the quiet maid who served in silence. Now the world was listening, waiting for her words. The thought terrified her. But then she thought of Logan's blood on her hands, of the unborn child's tiny heartbeat inside her, of her mother's voice whispering in her memories, "Baby, never let them make you small." Melinda nodded. "I'll testify." 2 weeks later, the courtroom overflowed with reporters. Cameras flashed. The Hamilton name had never been so whispered, so feared. Evelyn sat at the defense table, immaculate as ever, her expression unreadable. Her lawyer spoke in calm tones, but her eyes stayed locked on Melinda. When Melinda entered, the entire room went silent. She wore a simple navy dress, her hands folded over her stomach. She looked fragile, but there was something in her posture, quiet dignity, that silenced every murmur. The judge nodded. "Ms. Jones, you may proceed." Her voice trembled at first. "My name is Melinda Jones. I worked for the Hamilton family for 6 years." She paused, glancing briefly toward Evelyn, then back at the jury. "They told me I was helping them. They said it was legal, that I'd be a surrogate for their son and his wife. But they lied. They forged signatures, they took genetic material without consent, and they planned to take my baby, once it was born." The courtroom rippled with gasps. Evelyn's knuckles whitened. Melinda's voice steadied as she continued. "They thought I wouldn't understand, that I'd be too scared to speak. But I saw what they did, how they treated people like property. And I decided I wouldn't be silent anymore." She turned slightly, her gaze meeting Evelyn's. "You called it legacy. I call it cruelty." For the first time, Evelyn's mask cracked. Her lips parted, her composure faltered. "Do you have anything else to say, Ms. Jones?" the prosecutor asked. Melinda nodded. "Yes. I forgive them." The courtroom fell utterly still. "I forgive them," she repeated softly, "because I refuse to carry their hate any longer. But I will protect this child with everything I have. That's what real family means, not blood, not power, but love." By the time she stepped down from the stand, even the reporters had lowered their cameras. Outside, the wind rustled through the courthouse steps. The crowd waited, journalists, bystanders, activists, strangers. When Melinda emerged, flashbulbs erupted like fireworks. But instead of hiding, she stood tall, her hand resting protectively on her belly. A journalist called out, "Melinda, do you think the Hamiltons will ever apologize?" She smiled faintly. "They don't have to. The truth already did." At that same moment, inside the courthouse, Evelyn sat frozen, the verdict echoing in her ears, guilty of coercion, fraud, and conspiracy. Her empire was gone. Her reputation, ashes. But none of that compared to what came next. When she was led out in handcuffs, she caught sight of Logan waiting in the hallway. He looked up, his arms still in a sling, eyes tired but resolute. For the briefest second, their gazes met. "I never wanted this," she whispered as they passed. "I know," he said. "But you made it happen anyway." Later that evening, Melinda stood on the hospital balcony, watching the city lights blink below. Logan joined her quietly. His arm was healing, but his heart looked heavier than ever. "It's over," he said. She shook her head softly. "No, Logan. It's just beginning." He looked at her, uncertain. "What happens now?" Melinda smiled faintly. "I raise this child in peace. I give them what your family never gave you, a chance to grow up without fear." Logan exhaled, emotion catching in his throat. "And me?" She met his gaze gently. "You make peace with who you are. That's your freedom." He nodded slowly, understanding that forgiveness didn't mean return, it meant release. As the wind brushed her hair, Melinda looked up at the stars breaking through the city haze. For the first time, she felt the weight of survival give way to the lightness of purpose. She had faced power and walked away whole. Her child would be born into truth, not fear. And as the night settled around her, the faint sound of a baby's heartbeat echoed in her mind, steady, strong, alive. She smiled. "I kept my promise, Mama," she whispered. "They didn't win." 6 months later, spring finally came to New York. The city thawed, trading its gray skies for warmth and sunlight. Trees along the river bloomed in soft pinks and whites, as if the world itself had decided to start over. Far from the chaos of the past, in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Brooklyn, Melinda Jones lived a life that was hers again. Small, simple, but peaceful. The modest townhouse she rented wasn't much, but every brick of it felt like freedom. In the living room, sunlight filtered through lace curtains, illuminating the crib by the window. Inside lay a baby wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, tiny fingers curled around the air, as if reaching for tomorrow. Melinda stood over the crib, smiling. "Hey there, little one," she whispered. "We made it." The baby cooed softly and Melinda laughed, a sound lighter than it had ever been. The laughter of someone who had carried pain, survived it, and now carried hope instead. On the shelf nearby sat a newspaper clipping, neatly folded and framed. "Hamilton Scandal Exposes Exploitation in Surrogacy Industry. Survivor Melinda Jones Inspires Reform Bill." Beneath the headline, her picture, smiling gently, holding her newborn, had become a symbol of strength across the country. People had begun calling her the voice that broke the silence. But to Melinda, she was just a mother who had refused to give up. The knock on the door startled her. When she opened it, she found Logan Hamilton standing there. No suit this time, no bodyguards, just a simple shirt, jeans, and tired eyes that still held the same quiet regret. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he smiled faintly. "You look happy." She nodded. "I am." He stepped inside hesitantly, his gaze landing on the crib. "He's beautiful." Melinda corrected gently. "Her name's Hope." "Hope," he repeated softly, the word catching in his throat. "That's perfect." They stood side by side, looking down at the baby, a living reminder of everything that had torn them apart and everything that had saved them. "I didn't come to stay," he said finally. "I just wanted to see that you're both okay." "We're better than okay," she said, smiling. "And so will you be someday." He looked at her, eyes glistening. "You still believe that?" "I have to," she said. "Because if I don't, then all of this was just pain. And I want it to mean more than that." He nodded slowly. "My father's retired. He's trying to rebuild what's left of the company. My mother," he hesitated, then sighed. "She's serving her sentence. She writes me sometimes, but I don't respond." "Some wounds," Melinda said softly, "aren't meant to be reopened." He smiled weakly. "You always did see things clearly." A comfortable silence filled the room. Hope stirred in her crib, letting out a small sound, and Melinda gently picked her up. The baby blinked up at Logan, and for a second, the storm that had raged between their worlds seemed to dissolve. "She has your eyes," he said quietly. Melinda looked down at her daughter, her voice soft. "Maybe, but she's got her own soul." He smiled, nodding. "I should go." As he turned to leave, Melinda stopped him. "Logan." He looked back. "Thank you," she said, "for standing up when you didn't have to." He swallowed hard. "You gave me something my family never did, a reason to be better." He left without another word, disappearing into the soft hum of the afternoon. Melinda watched from the window as he walked down the quiet street, sunlight catching on his shoulders. She didn't feel sadness. She felt closure, pure and clean. She turned back to her daughter, smiling as she rocked her gently. The room was filled with the scent of baby powder and blooming lilacs from the open window. Outside, a pair of doves landed on the balcony rail, cooing softly, their feathers shining in the morning light. Melinda whispered, "You're free now, baby girl. No one owns your story. You get to write your own." She sat by the window, holding Hope close as the baby drifted to sleep. For the first time in years, Melinda let her mind wander, not to the past, but to the future. Maybe she'd start the foundation she dreamed of, one to help women who'd been silenced, manipulated, or forgotten. Maybe she'd speak at schools, tell young girls they were never too small to matter. Maybe she'd write a book. Whatever she did, it would come from a place of truth. Because she had learned that power doesn't live in titles or money, it lives in those who refuse to let pain define them. A gentle breeze moved the curtains, carrying the faint sound of church bells from down the street. Melinda closed her eyes, holding her daughter close, and whispered, "This is what peace feels like." And somewhere far away, behind the high walls of a women's correctional facility, Evelyn Hamilton sat alone in her cell, watching the news. On the tiny television, a reporter spoke about the Melinda Jones Women's Protection Act, a new federal law inspired by Melinda's testimony, designed to regulate surrogacy ethics and protect women from coercion. For the first time in her life, Evelyn had nothing to control. No empire, no legacy, no followers. Just silence. And in that silence, she finally understood what she had destroyed. She turned off the television. Back in Brooklyn, Melinda hummed softly, the same melody her mother once sang while washing dishes. Hope's tiny hand rested against her cheek, warm and pure. "Everything's going to be all right," Melinda whispered. "We made it." The sunlight broke fully across the room, golden and endless. For the first time since stepping into the Hamilton mansion all those years ago, Melinda Jones was not anyone's maid. She was a survivor. A mother. A woman reborn. And as the bells outside faded into the city's hum, her story came to rest, not in tragedy, but in triumph. If Melinda's story moved you, if you believe strength can rise from the quietest voices, tell us in the comments what hope means to you. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.